Hello there, and welcome to Gooner U, where there are no degrees because the learning never stops. I'm Dov, a TA here at Gooner U, and my friend Keith is our stalwart distinguished professor of Arsenal and football studies. This week we'll be discussing the various international play-in tournaments, including some first-hand experiences. Hello, Keith. How's your summer been?
Hello, Dov. Well, since I've last seen you, I've been through a hurricane.
Oh, no.
So that was like 2 days afterwards, by the way.
Oh.
I live in Houston, and yes, we got hit by Hurricane Beryl. I lost power for most of one day, and so I was one of the lucky ones. The rest of the city other parts of the city had some deeper struggles with that. But I didn't. So, it was, yes, hurricane. And now it's kind of crazy that as we record this, July is only a few more days left, which is wild to say. But that means,
where to go.
But you know what that means? It's almost time for the Arsenal.
Oh, yeah. Looking forward to it. But in the meanwhile, we've got some fun stuff to talk about that's been happening over the summer. Actually, before we get to that, put a pin in that for a second. I want to point out to our viewers and listeners, we are now on Instagram as well as Threads and Twitter. We've always been on Twitter, or at least for a very long time, practically always. So when we do our episodes each week, we are coming up with topics that are good for shorts, which are a minute or less. So we'll post those on YouTube, but then also we're posting those on Twitter, Instagram, and Threads. So if that's a place you prefer short form video content, feel free, please go there, like and subscribe and comment and do all the social engagement things that help other people find our show. And also, in case anyone hasn't been paying attention with the Premier League not playing over the summer, we've had a couple film studies episodes. So we had 2 episodes ago, episode 246, we talked about ladybugs and kicking and screaming. That was a fun one. And then just recently we did Bend It Like Beckham. So that was episode number 247. So the final short from that should be coming out tomorrow as we record. So recently, before you are listening or watching this, you should have the last short available. But if you want to check out the full episode, please do.
Checking our youth soccer summer.
Right. Youth ? When it comes to Bend It Like Beckham.
Youth-ish. Young at heart. You know what? Let's just leave that be. Let's just leave that.
All right. So, want to start with some World Cup qualification updates?
Yes. So it's the summer. That means no Arsenal, no Premier League, but it does mean international tournaments. There are some. Well, we always hit this in international breaks, right? There are some fans who hate the international breaks. They don't care about the international game. They care about the club, their team. That's it. That's totally fine. Good for you. Those people are wrong. International game is awesome. I immensely enjoy the summer games. So yeah, so we got a lot going on. Most, I'm sure, will be aware of the European Championships, the Euros, as they are popularly known, and also the Copa America, also the ongoing Olympic tournament, which we can talk about. But also, yes, World Cup qualifying did in fact continue in June because there is a lot of teams that have to get eliminated between now and June of 2026. Well, actually, I think it's more like December of 25 because I believe that's when they actually do the draw for the groups. But anyway,
okay, yeah,
we got a long way to go, but we did say goodbye to some of our show's friends, if you will. But we'll get to that. So, we're gonna bounce around, do a little bounce around the world. Let's start with where we started was Asia. So let's start to Asia.
Yeah.
How's India doing?
Apparently not very well. They drew a scoreless draw against Kuwait and then were eliminated by a 1-2 margin at Qatar. So they're done. Bye-bye, India.
Yeah, I will say actually that it probably wasn't the Qatar loss officially eliminated them, but really to not beat Kuwait at home. When they did beat them actually at Kuwait, that was in the beginning of the group, but to not do that, that really, I think, would have been, looking at the standings, I think they probably would have been out anyway, because it would have been, they'd have been up to 7 points. No, they would have been at 7 points. Kuwait would have been at 6. So they would have gotten through. So that's a tough one for India to go out that way. But, as they say, the team that scores more goals is, how do you win the game? He's got to score more goals than the other team. So,
So what is the structure of the AFC qualifications? Is it like a group stage and then like quarterfinal, semifinal type thing, or
so no, it is 3 group stages. So 2 group. No, actually, hold on, wait. There's 5 rounds. This is long.
Oh boy.
So the first one was basically a 2-leg knockouts with some of the lowest ranked teams, and those teams made it into the second round, which is what just finished.
Oh, okay. So they get assigned a new group basically when they enter that second round.
They will now be in groups. There are, I think it's 3 groups of 6. The top 2 in each group qualify directly for the World Cup, and then the 3rd and 4th place teams in each group go to the 4th round of qualifying, which looks to be another group maybe, and then this is another group, and then eventually leads to a 5th round, which is basically a playoff between the last 2 teams. Again, this is 2026 is going to be the biggest World Cup ever. They're up to 48 teams, so everybody's redoing or remaking their qualification processes because you have to account for the fact you have more spots than you did before.
Right.
So, yeah, this is all brand new, and 5 rounds. Let's do it.
All right.
Unless you're India, then you won't do it.
Don't do it. Yeah.
You did not in fact do it. I'm sorry, India, but fare thee well, Blue Tigers.
So how did Japan fare?
Speaking of blue, Samurai Blue. They beat Myanmar 5-0. That was on the road, and then at home beat Syria 5-0, which means they finished their group with 6 wins from 6, 18 points. A goal difference of plus 24. They scored 24 goals and conceded 0.
Wow.
So it went well. Is what we'll say.
Sure.
And to be fair, I do remember that one of those was actually a forfeit. The forfeit by North Korea, which would have been their home game.
Right.
So it was officially a 3-0 win from Japan. The Japanese probably still would have won that game. It might not have been a shutout, but oh well. North Korea, by the way, in spite of that, did finish second in the group, and they also qualify for the next round. So there's that.
When there's a forfeit like that, so when you said 3-0, that's the match points, or do we give them artificial goals scored?
3-0 is it goes officially into the books as a 3-0 result.
Oh, okay.
So officially Japan wins the game 3-0 with actually getting credit for scoring goals, of course.
Right.
And that's for the purposes of the group standings. So you remember that Japan gets the 3 points of the win and plus 3 added to their goal difference. And part of that, I imagine, is to really discourage forfeits. I mean, a 3-0 loss is a bad thing in a group. So
yeah.
But North Korea survived. But then again, Syria and Myanmar. I mean, North Korea is always at least a decent team, has occasionally qualified for the World Cup. Syria obviously has its own problems, and Myanmar struggles as well. So in that sense, I don't think that was a calculated maneuver on their part, but also I'm sure the North Koreans aren't particularly bothered by the ultimate result. So
right. All right. So what is going on in Africa?
So Africa, Egypt picked up a 2-1 win at home against Burkina Faso, and then 1-1 at Guinea-Bissau. So through 4 games out of 10 in the group, they are on top of the table with 10 points, with 3 wins and a draw. So far it's going pretty well. Winner of the group qualifies directly for the World Cup. The runner-up goes to what Wikipedia calls a possible playoff stage. But which means they might qualify, not the playoff stages. There will be a playoff. It's just a question of who's in it. Yes, Egypt right now so far in good shape, at least through 4 games. Through 4 games of qualifying, 6 more to go in that group. How about the other? Let's go to the other end of the continent. How about South Africa?
Yeah, so they drew 1-1 at Nigeria and then won 3-1 over Zimbabwe. That was at home. So they have 7 points. They are tied for first with Benin, I guess that's pronounced, and Rwanda. So they're doing well in their group also. So
yeah, the draw against Nigeria is an interesting one because Nigeria, you look at their group, Nigeria is historically the strongest team in there, though they're currently sitting in 5th with 3 draws and a loss. They've had an awful start to qualifying. And I guess if you're South Africa, actually, I'm looking at it again. A 1-1 at Nigeria is a pretty great result. I'd forgotten, mixed up. I thought they were at home. It's like, oh, you really want to get them when they're down. But yeah, 1-1 at Nigeria is a pretty good result for South Africa. So they're currently in second on goal difference. Now I look at it. They're at +1. Rwanda is at +2, and therefore in front. But still, 6 games left. Lots more to go in qualification for the Africans.
Yeah. All right, so let's take it over to our home confederation, CONCACAF.
Yes, our friends over in CONCACAF who kicked off qualifying, and then several of these teams actually then joined the Copa America. So it was a busy summer for, in our case, as we know, Costa Rica and Jamaica. Costa Rica, the Ticos, in their group 4-0 over St. Kitts and Nevis. That was at home, and then 3-0 at Grenada. They have 2 more games left right now. They're top of the group, 6 points, 7-0 on goal difference. So that's pretty good so far. They still have 2 games left. They will face Bahamas and Trinidad in next June. So we're gonna have a little time off before CONCACAF picks back up. But that's Costa Rica. You were watching Jamaica and the Reggae Boys.
Yeah, by the way, though, I will say, like, if I were to travel to see any of these matches, it certainly sounds like these CONCACAF ones are some of the nicest locations you could go to. Like, yeah, sure, I'll go to the Bahamas.
CONCACAF is island soccer. Listen, we can talk off air. I know a couple of podcasters who do it. They've got some wild travel stories. We can. We don't need to share, spread the love. World of CONCACAF. It's a great little podcast about CONCACAF. And these guys have traveled to. They were all Americans. Then they're big US fans. They've traveled to all of these sites. CONCACAF is a trip and a half. That's all I'll say on that score. But yes, speaking of fun times, Jamaica.
Yeah, exactly. So they won 1-0 at home against the Dominican Republic, and then 3-2 away at Dominica. So they are at 6 points also. They are tied with Guatemala. I don't know what the goal difference is there, if that is the tiebreaker in CONCACAF. But yeah, they are at the top of their group right now. So.
Yeah, actually, just looking at it. Technically they're in second because Jamaica's at +2. Guatemala's at +9.
They're doing pretty well. All right.
6-0 against Dominica and then 3-0 against the British Virgin Islands. But the two of them will face each other in the final game of that group as I look through the schedule. So
that's fortuitous scheduling.
They are, as I look at that, they are easily the 2 best teams in that group. So that's probably and either way, the top 2 in these groups advances to the next round. So I think Jamaica's with the result over the Dominican Republic, they're in pretty good shape. To advance.
So when do the other confederations have their qualifications starting?
Right. So who do we have left? CONMEBOL, the South Americans, and the Marathon League that they run, still haven't done anything since we last spoke, which I believe was March. They, of course, were in the Copa America this summer, so no qualifiers. Their next games are in September, so we will pick up with Colombia and Argentina then. Also coming up in September, we'll have to talk about this, the Oceania Football Confederation, that is OFC, which is New Zealand and a bunch of tiny islands in the South Pacific. They will have their entire qualification tournament in September.
Okay.
It's
get it done.
Actually, let me rephrase that. That is historically what it's been. No, actually, I'm sorry. They have their first round in September, which is going to be some small islands, and then the main tournament will be October and November, and then they will have a playoff in March of 25. So yeah, it's more. It used to be they do the entire thing as like one self-contained tournament. And now, obviously, it's different because they get an automatic berth this time. They don't have to go to a playoff. They are officially in for real. They're directly in by winning their confederation. So, but we'll talk more about Oceania. Oceania. Actually, know how you pronounce that.
I think I've heard Oceania, but yeah, I can't say for sure.
Yeah, something like that. Anyway, whatever it is, we're going to talk about them when we hit international break in September.
Right.
That's coming up there. And then last but not least, certainly not least, UEFA, the Europeans. They, of course, were busy this summer with their tournament. Their qualification kicks off in March. I don't know if they've actually done group draws yet for that. But we still have to. No, they haven't done that yet, I guess. I don't know when that is. I'm trying to look it up. I can't find it right away, so I'm not going to. That's all right. Anyway, yeah, they'll have group draws eventually. They still have a Nations League to play their way through, so they've got some stuff to worry about this fall. But they'll be up on it starting in March of 25.
So when we talk about the Oceania Confederation, you said Australia doesn't compete with them because they're in Asia. Is that what it is for FIFA purposes?
Yes, Australia is a member of the AFC. In fact, they're in Japan's group for final qualifying. So I expect. So yeah, that'll be them and Saudi Arabia are top two qualify. That's it's almost certainly I think going to be the two of those three.
Yeah,
I don't have a lot of faith in Bahrain, China, or Indonesia. So,
all right. So let's shift gears to the tournaments that happened this summer. So the Euros. Why don't you fill me in? Because I kind of saw a couple things here and there, but I was not following very closely.
Yeah. So the European Championships they're always a fun tournament. There's definitely a Eurocentric perspective that says, in some ways they're actually better than the World Cup, which, okay, thanks guys. But the European Championships have expanded over recent years. It was not long ago, only 16 teams. I mean, you're talking about really 16 teams out of Europe. I mean, you're talking about maybe 2/3 of that tournament goes in with a legitimate shot of winning it. Mm-hmm. They have expanded. They expanded. I think it was the previous one in Euro 2020, which of course was played in 2021. Was I believe the first one where they went up to 24. Or maybe that was 2016 that did that. Anyway, they're a great tournament in the World Cup off year. Another strong tournament this year. This year was held in Germany, it sounds like it went off very well. The Germans were okay. We got some pretty great moments, some pretty good goals, some fun underdog teams, and it ended with Spain and England, who I think honestly in terms of play were two of the Spain in particular was the best team in the tournament, and then they won. I thought England, England's expectations I think are so high to the point that they're disappointed by making the final because they didn't play as well as they should have, or they think they should have. I thought England was okay. Yeah, they got rescued at the last minute by Jude Bellingham's ridiculous bicycle kick goal to tie Slovakia in their knockout game before they won it in an extra time. But some drama in the Euros, but overall a really solid tournament. Spain a worthy winner. I did watch. I was traveling a lot during that tournament, so I didn't see as much of it as I would have wanted. But I did watch. I did watch the final in Spain. Spain was a worthy champion. Really good team, really young team, and a couple of names, one or two names on there to keep an eye on. At least one name to keep an eye on from an Arsenal perspective. We can get to that a little bit another time. But congratulations to Spain, 4-time European champions. Good for them.
Yeah. And then the Olympics just kicked off last week, this weekend, as we recording on July 29th. So, so from an American perspective, you've said that this is treated like a youth tournament by us or everyone?
No, that's a FIFA standard.
Okay.
So remember, side note, let's talk about the Olympics for a moment. The Olympics, in some ways, should not be thought of as a singular event unto themselves. What they are essentially is a collective set of world championships, all of which are administered by the various federations that run those particular sports that all host their own world. They'll, especially if you watch. I don't know. Are you a big I don't think you're a big Olympics guy, right?
Not really, no.
So if you watch, they'll talk about, especially like the swimming is on right now. And they're like, they were at the World Championships last year. They did this. They host a World Championships every year. And it's run by whatever the international governing body of the sport is. FIFA, because I can't use Olympics as a metaphor here, but if we think back to all the times we've talked about some of the corruption endemic in FIFA and its various member confederations, the IOC is right there with them. Yeah. I mean, there are two organizations that on some level absolutely deserve each other. there are a lot of long-standing rivalries between them involving stupid things like who has more members. It's FIFA because the home nations count as individual ones. But there's also, from FIFA's perspective, at least as far as men's soccer is concerned, the World Cup is the premier event. And they want the World Cup to be the premier event. And so, and given where it fits in the calendar too, FIFA declares that the Olympics is a U23 tournament. So it is. Gosh, I was just looking at the cutoff. I don't remember if it's. I don't remember if it's you had to be under 23 if you. I don't remember if you turn 23 this year, the year of the games, or if it's you turn 23 in the year after the Olympics is what the cutoff is. I don't remember exactly what it is. But as a bit of because these countries don't actually have U23 sides regularly. They'll have U20s and they have FIFA World Cups for them. But as a way to sort of help goose the competition a little bit, you are allowed 3 what are called overage players. So you are allowed 3 people on your roster, guys who are old and 23, who could be all kinds of things. Sometimes they're slightly older because they fill a gap in your team. In the U.S. case, it's both of our starting center backs, because they don't have any good center backs at that age group. Sometimes it's a veteran player who you think will just add a little bit of presence to the side. In 2016, Brazil added Neymar, who was their best, the great Neymar when he was actually still good and not hurt all the time, because the Olympics were in Rio and Brazil really, really wanted to win the men's soccer gold medal in Rio, and Neymar really wanted to be a part of it. Since I've been watching the U.S. and a few others, France, among their overage players is their captain, Alexandre Lacazette, who you may remember from I know you came on board the Amazon season, if we will, at Arsenal. Lacazette, who unfortunately scored a goal against the Americans. I mean, looked good doing it. Shout out to a former gunner there, but that was a little annoying the way the game played out. They actually started before the opening ceremony last Friday. Their first games were on Wednesday. U.S. has played 2 games so far. They lost to France, and then they beat New Zealand, and they will play Guinea tomorrow as we record. So Tuesday they'll play Guinea. I think they have a good chance to beat. They should have a good chance to beat Guinea and make it to the knockout stages. Among the favorites, France, Spain, and then also Argentina is there. Shockingly lost to Morocco in a bizarre game, and then has since followed that up by winning again. They have several guys from the Copa América actually are on their roster currently. Because Argentina definitely has some good young players and all of that. So Olympic soccer men's side is a weird tournament, which flip the switch to the women's tournament. All senior teams pretty much equal in prestige to the World Cup. Watched a cracker of a game. Canada scored a late in stoppage time to beat France Sunday, which was that was a fun game to end. Especially because the Canadians are in a whole heap of trouble.
Is this something we should talk about now, or save it a little bit till we're talking about a certain Canada quarterfinal match?
Another Canadian game. So let's just throw this out now, since it's the Olympics portion of the show. Right before the Olympics started, the Canadians got in trouble because a drone was seen flying above the New Zealand women's team's practice session. The person operating said drone was someone connected to the Canadian Soccer Federation or Association, whatever they're called. Mm-hmm. He was arrested for flying a drone in a restricted airspace. Right. But also, why would they be flying a drone over New Zealand's practice? Except, right. So ultimately, the Canadian women's coach resigned. This happened before the games before the opening ceremony started. She resigned. Canada has since been docked 6 points. Now there's a chance if they win all 3 of their games, which they're 2 for 2, they beat New Zealand, they beat France. If they win their third game, there is a chance they could squeeze through to the next round. But they're a power. I think they won gold 4 years ago. They're a powerhouse on the women's side. They're a very good women's team. Anyway, turns out as stories are coming out about this is not the first time they've done this. This apparently is not the first time someone connected with Canadian women's or men's has done this. The current Canadian men's coach, Jesse Marsh, who will come up later, has denied any involvement in this or knowledge of it, which isn't surprising. He's only been the coach for 6 months. That doesn't strike me as too strange, but
it's plausible.
My understanding is that his predecessor, John Herdman, who coached both the men's and women's teams at Canada, not at the same time, I should point out, but coached both of those teams. I don't believe he said anything yet. So this can be very interesting, kind of weird. And Canada, by the way, is a federation that is a mess. They have serious financial problems. They have real disagreements with their own players. There was this whole thing where they scheduled a friendly against Iran prior to the World Cup, which people were furious about because Canada does not have a great relationship with Iran.
Okay.
So, and there are some other bits and pieces involved in geopolitics with that. But anyway, yeah, just they have. I mean, people complain about the U.S. Soccer Federation, a good chunk of which is deserved. But they could be in really big trouble right now. So I don't really know what to make of that, except that this may well have been not the first time. But we will, I'm sure, learn more in the coming months.
Yeah, not good for them. So, anything else to talk about with the Olympics before we move on?
No, I don't think so. Olympics are on.
Right.
Olympics. I enjoy the Olympics. I just love watching all different kinds of things over the and the Olympic soccer, obviously, which is great. But but the Olympics are great. And you should enjoy the Olympics.
I'm sure we'll give an update as the tournament progresses while we're recording our regular Arsenal episodes. We'll give updates as far as how the soccer side of the Olympics is doing. So, yeah. So meanwhile, before we move on, let me tell everyone about a tool that is near and dear to Keith's and my hearts. It's something that we use every episode called Zencastr. We record, like I said, every episode with it, and we do so because it is so easy. All you do is you log in using your browser and you start recording a high-quality podcast right away. You can record studio-quality sound and up to 4K video with your guests. Feel a sense of zen knowing Zencastr's multi-layered backups ensure you always have your recordings in the highest quality, even if the connection is unstable. It's an all-in-one solution, so if you've thought about podcasting before and gave up thinking you needed a lot of different tools and services, those days are over. With Zencastr's all-in-one podcasting platform, you can create your podcast all in one place and then distribute to Spotify, Apple, and other major destinations. They also have an iPhone app, so you can even record on the go. If your iPhone is what you have available, then you can use that. So if that sounds good to you, go to zencastr.com/pricing and use our code Gooner, and you'll get 30% off your first month of any Zencastr paid plan. I want you to have the same easy experience as we do for all our podcasting and content needs. It's time for you to share your story. All right. So now we're going to talk about Copa América, which you and I saw some matches from, which was this was fun. So on June 25th, before my son and I traveled to Texas, we caught a group stage match, Argentina versus Chile. Argentina won at the very, very end of regular time, 1-0. That was a fun match to watch. So I saw that with my son. This is his second soccer match that he's seen, and he enjoyed it a lot more than the last time. And then the next week, he and I traveled to Texas to visit family. And while we were there, since there were also matches going on just down the road from my parents in Arlington at the AT&T Stadium down there, I invited Keith and we went and saw Venezuela versus Canada in the quarterfinal match. So that was another match won late, only this time it went past regulation time and Canada ended up winning on penalties. So
penalty shootout, by the way, that was right in front of us, which is always fun.
Yeah, it was cool. So for both matches, the tickets that I got were kind of like facing the corner. Like if you're looking straight forward from your seats, you're looking at the goalpost from the side. And yeah, that worked out very well. But the shootout was directly in front of us because due to a coin toss, like it could have been at the opposite side of a stadium, which would not have been anywhere near as fun to watch. But
No, definitely. We'll get to that one. I do want to ask a little bit about the Argentina Chile experience. As you mentioned, It was your second live game. Obviously, the first one being last summer. You saw Arsenal United in their preseason game. So
right, their America series, right?
How was the second experience?
It was very different for a few reasons. So first of all, the day before the match, I was working in the city, in New York City that day, and I was meeting another friend. I was meeting him for dinner, and I had cause to walk through Times Square, and everyone I saw was dressed as I am now in the blue and white for Argentina. Everybody, like just blue and white everywhere you look. There was like some kind of big rally or gathering going on there. Just like it was a fun atmosphere. I've never had that walking through a city that isn't part of some kind of organized like protest or something. Just like that was pretty cool. And it carried through into the stadium. I mean, when you were there, it was basically an Argentina home match. I mean, you were talking upwards of 90% of the fans there were from Argentina and not Chile. Chile, whose flag I discovered is conspicuously similar to Texas's flag. And actually, I guess Chile formed within like 10 years of Texas, but just a little bit after. So they come by it honestly, probably.
I feel like we had talked about this at some point. I feel like the answer is they are unrelated, but yeah, I mean, that's a general.
But yeah, so that was one thing, was having a home crowd around you was interesting. And I mean, I went into the match saying to myself that I'm really not cheering for either side, that I don't have like a horse in this race, and it's just fun to see the match. But very quickly, with everyone around me cheering for Argentina, and of course I was there to see Messi as much as or more than anything else, that was I was cheering for Argentina before long. And it was interesting just because, like, when I saw Arsenal and United a year ago, there was no home team. Like the crowd was roughly evenly divided. Both teams were on another continent from where they usually play. And it was different. It was fun, but the other key difference is that was a game that did not matter. When I saw them lose to United, it wasn't like, I would have preferred to see them win, of course, but this was a game with stakes. This was a game that actually mattered. Like, for Chile, probably more than for Argentina, because I don't know. I think it was more or less a fait accompli that Argentina was going to make it out of the group stage, at least.
I mean, we say that. I mean, you got to do it, and they would have been a little nervous at that point, because I did watch some of that game on TV, and I mean, for a good chunk of it, Argentina generally, so I could tell, was better, and that makes sense. Chile's kind of come down from about a decade ago or so, a little bit less than a decade ago, and the golden generation of Chileans has kind of passed, and they're not great right now. So for them, a draw would have been an awesome result. But of course, it's not just to give up a goal, but a backbreaking one, as they did. Kind of stings. But from the Argentine perspective, I imagine you got quite a celebration.
I mean, to that point in time, I had never heard cheering as loud as when they scored that late goal from a corner kick that way. And again, like, because I was sitting like right near the corner, and actually I was in a different direction from the corner, actually, like looking forward, I was looking down the touch line. So I was at like kitty corner from where you and I were sitting. But yeah, like the crowd, like I've started using, I used to, when I went to concerts and stuff, I'd bring concert earplugs to wear. I stopped bringing those to live venues because generally just putting in my AirPods is good enough. It reduces the sound levels to a comfortable level, and I can actually hear people. Like if I'm conversing with the people I'm there with, I find I can hear them better than with the concert earplugs, actually. But they just didn't know what to do. Like it was way too much for them to even contemplate canceling out. So it was a unique failure mode. It just sounded like crackling, like fireworks going off or something. It was that was interesting. But yeah, it was just uproarious, like cheering, like nothing else I've ever heard. Like, probably 70,000+ Argentines all cheering at once as loud as they can.
I mean, as you pointed out, you got the big distinction. Of course, this is a game that actually mattered,
right?
As opposed to, of course, the preseason friendly. And I imagine. So, from what I saw, watching most of them on TV, Argentina fans showed up all tournament. They in Colombia really sort of stood out to me. I mean, when you turned on a game and it was an Argentina game, the stadium was blue. We turned on a Colombia game, it was yellow, and then you got to the final. Big surprise. The two of them were there. The two of them had really good tournaments.
So it turned green.
Well, no, they kept that
blue and yellow.
Well, we can talk. We might have to mention that final as well, because boy, that got crazy.
Okay.
Not so much the game as outside the stadium, but yeah, that's a cool thing to have been a part of. I've never been in a crowd quite like that. I've been in some pretty good crowds for various sporting events, but never quite. Not that kind of we'll say Latin American crowd, which comes with its own kind of a style and flair. I've never quite done that. Well, certainly not quite like Argentina.
Yeah, and it was interesting with the Venezuelans compared to the Argentine fans too. Like, it was overall. I don't want to say like a more negative attitude from the Argentines, but like definitely like. Strongly opinionated, I guess you might say. And my son was exposed to Spanish language curse words for the first time.
Yeah. I think some of that stems from sort of their respective places in the South American and also in the world stage. I mean, Argentina is a team that expects to win. Mm-hmm. Sometimes, frankly, even when they shouldn't. But currently, they really should. They're, of course, they won the previous Copa America. They've won the World Cup. They're on a roll right now. In terms of winning things. So yeah, they're going to feel very, and Argentines are all South American countries have, a certain amount of pride in their country and their nationality. But the Argentines have a certain reputation, not entirely a bad one, but some of their frustration, I'm sure, stems from their expectations, which are to win the tournament. Whereas Venezuela does not have that same kind of expectation. Since they're going to be our obvious point of comparison. Argentina's won the Copa more times than anyone else. Venezuela has never won it. So that really, there's a bit of a difference there. In terms of that. But yeah, that must have been a cool thing. And also, we should ask, since you were there to see, the great one. Well, that was actually Wayne Gretzky. But since you were there to see Messi, how was it? How was it to watch Messi live?
No, it was good. It was good. I mean, the winning corner kick he took the corner kick that ended up winning the match at the end. Other than that, he had a bunch of good shots. They just didn't quite find the target, but some good opportunities that he took advantage of. And it was fun. It was one of the reasons that I was happy my son was able to go, just to be able to say that he saw him play, like clearly an all-time great. Yeah.
I mean, I'll ask this: did you find yourself like watching him, or I don't want to say watching the ball, but like, watching the game, obviously tracking the ball and his movement, or were there points where you were like, I'm going to focus on Messi for a couple minutes just so to see what he does,
Yeah, definitely. And taking advantage of being able to look at him even when he wasn't on the ball was great. Being in the stadium, being able to look where I want instead of where the camera goes. Mm-hmm. So yeah, no, definitely a mixture of both, depending on where the game was and where my attention was at that point. Of course, there was also, and this was kind of a funny thing in that particular crowd. Like in any arena, like you have people who want to stand, and the problem is the people who are standing then force the people behind them to have to stand if they want to see anything. And so one of the repeated refrains of the night was "Siéntense, por favor," like please sit down. And this would happen every so often, and it was, yeah. I mean,
not gonna happen.
It did. Like enough, like people would be shamed into sitting for a little while, but then the people all the way toward the front wouldn't almost ever. And so, yeah, it didn't last long when it did happen. But so then that left me with my son, who, with people standing, he can't see at all unless he stands on top of the seat next to me, which he wasn't comfortable doing at first. But, he also was getting really tired of standing, like from standing the whole time. So we got into a routine of like, okay, when we were sitting, which would happen every so often, he'd sit, he'd rest for a little bit. But as soon as the ball came back toward our side, then that's when everybody wants to stand up to try and see better. And I got really good at like assisting him in like lifting like really fast. Like he would sit on my lap and have one foot on the seat next to me, and I would stand up and like propel him into the air, and he would find the seat with his other foot, and we got pretty good at that. But it took some of my attention off of the game having to manage that a little bit more. Compared to with you and I, like we didn't sit the entire time when the clock was running. We were standing. So
I mean, and we, you know, that was just kind of the nature we were. So we were surrounded by Venezuelans. I mean, part of that is because obviously it's a big moment for them and their team in the Copa America. Also because Canada, is a smaller country that doesn't have quite the same soccer following, is building that soccer following. You know, in Canada, they don't have quite the same things. So, you know, that stadium and those, you know, people who don't know, AT&T Stadium in Arlington, Texas, is a big one. It is a big stadium, as is MetLife in outside New York. So, I mean, these are big stadiums. Canada would not have been able to fill that necessarily.
Right.
But, you know, but then again, they also went home happy. So who cares? Obviously, I'll sort of start with you.
So you want to shift gears?
Having seen both of these games, what was maybe different for you? I mean, not just in terms of the result. Obviously, we saw a shootout in there, but in terms of watching them, I mean, how did the game seem different to you, just across the two contests?
Well, for one thing, I mean, watching the first one with a 7-year-old compared to watching the second one with a friend who is like the most knowledgeable person I know about soccer, that is a big difference. Like I learned a lot watching the game with you. That was great.
The fact that I'm the most knowledgeable person you have about this says a lot about how few soccer friends you actually have. But that's okay. That's okay.
So
just undermine the entire purpose of the show, by the way.
Yeah, right. So no, I mean, but aside from that, just like focusing on what was actually happening, I mean, you could tell. It was funny. In a way, even though we were watching a quarterfinal match, you could tell that both teams were not at the level of at least Argentina. I mean, Chile was Chile. They didn't really do much. They were just doing what they could to keep Argentina from scoring whenever they needed to. But it kind of felt like both teams were kind of less threatening, and it was just kind of very tepid going back and forth between Canada and Venezuela versus Argentina was just kind of always pressing. Like the ball was always in Chile's side. It was so that was different. Like seeing that style of play, like that dominating style is you know, one big difference. I mean, I think they were more evenly matched. Canada and Chile actually had played out to a scoreless draw in the group stage. So there's your point of comparison there. Okay. Yeah.
But I mean, the one thing I took away from the game was really the physicality. It was a physical game, and some of that was on the two teams. You know, jokes about Canadian temperament aside, their team certainly knows how to muck it up a little bit, and so do the Venezuelans. They've got a few tough customers as well. So, you know, some of it's just the style of play there, but some of it's also the officiating, which, you know, the referee was definitely lenient. I didn't think it was terrible. I mean, some of the post-game stuff I read was about how he lost control of the game. I never thought that. I mean, there were certainly far worse examples of that throughout the course of the Copa America. But overall, he definitely let it be a physical game, which that's always interesting. Sometimes that really plays into one team or another's hands. I don't know that was really the case here. I thought Venezuela was, well, I guess I don't know. Before I sort of give my thoughts on it. Overall, though, just in terms of the quality of the game, you said it was tepid. You didn't think either team was really going for it?
I don't know. I mean, of course, Venezuela had to, once Canada scored fairly, you know, toward the middle, I think, of the first half, then they had to more, but it was just kind of, and maybe that's just the way that a game would be, like toward the beginning, like, you know, you don't necessarily go all out from the kickoff, but yeah, I don't know, like neither team seemed like as relentless, I guess, to me.
I mean, on some level, I think that's fair. Knockout games have that reputation of teams being, when they say cagey, where the teams are nobody, because you don't want to make the mistake that gives up the goal.
Right.
But as you saw, Canada scored relatively early. Actually, looking up, it was the 13th minute, which I thought was a little late.
Oh wow! But I thought it was later than that. Okay, yeah.
But yeah, and so that obviously changes it. Now, I'll say this as well. And part of this, I think, is with working with Marsh and how he has Canada play, but also I think is a testament to some of the talent level you see there. I thought Venezuela was definitely much more forward. It felt like the game was played much more in the Canadian end, but Venezuela at times struggled to create opportunities in the final third and really create the kind of dangerous scoring chances they regularly needed. I mean, arguably their goal, which we'll talk about probably shortly, had nothing to do with any of that at all. It was kind of a broken play, excellent play on the other end. Whereas Canada was content to play not quite bunker and counter, but definitely sit back and attack. And I think the Canadians ultimately had more shots on goal, even though they were ceding possession and largely ceding some of the overall opportunities to the Venezuelans. I think is how that statistically at least played out.
And the officiation was definitely a huge difference too, though, because with the Argentina match, I mean, there were a lot of calls and almost none of them went in Argentina's favor. And that was one thing that the crowd was particularly vocal about. And I didn't really blame them. Now, I mean, it's funny when you see the crowd reacting to a call. It's like most of the time you're not actually seeing anything with enough clarity to observe the minute details and determine did he really make the right call or not. Like, I feel like you can a lot of the time on TV, especially when you're seeing a few replays, but a second or third time and they're slowing it down or freeze framing. It's like you kind of get a sense whether the referee got it right or not. But like in the stadium, they don't know. They just want the call in their own team's favor,
Well, yeah. But then again, as you pointed out, you were sitting amongst the Argentine fans who, everyone. I mean, how many times have we complained about the officiating on Arsenal's perspective on this show? Well, but let's be honest, and I know, and I'm fully conscious of this. A good chunk of that is like you only notice the ones that go against you, right? You only notice the times when the referees does something that it hurts your team or doesn't help your team, and you kind of gloss over, other than maybe some of the most obvious ones where your team clearly gets away, may or may not have gotten away with something. So, there's always that bias at play there when you talk about officiating, and that's just the nature of sports in general. Forget soccer, just kind of sports in general. How it kind of works. But Canada got a goal and a bit of a deflection, a bouncing ball. And then in the second half, Venezuela equalized with what might be the goal of the tournament.
Oh, really?
That was probably one of the better goals of the tournament. So if you haven't seen it, you should look it up because it's pretty awesome. The ball breaks into just past the halfway line into the Canadian half. Crepeau is off his line. Salomon Rondon, the Venezuelan striker and the captain, beats his defender and essentially chips it from near midfield into the goal. And I don't know that you can really understate how difficult that is to do.
I know. I mean, when we were watching it transpire, I was like, oh, he's got a really good opportunity here, but will he be able to do that was what I was wondering. I was like, oh, he did. He got it just over the guy's head. He couldn't reach it, and it rolled in gracefully.
And that was it's just slow enough that you kind of are...
Right.
you can watch, you almost feel your emotions playing. So much stuff in so many games, as I'm sure you saw, some of them happen so fast. Like it sort of happens and you're just like, that thing just happened. But in this one, you could see the arc and watch, and it does one of those moments where it felt like things were going in slow motion. It was an excellent finish. And again, being surrounded by, it had to have been 80-90% Venezuelan fans. That was fun. That was a lot of fun.
That was my first beer shower.
I was about to say, have you gotten to wash the beer out of it?
I know. Of course, it was not the last one of the night because then the penalty shootout happened.
Interesting in the Copa América, for reasons that still aren't clear to me. This isn't the first tournament they've done this. They've done it in the past, but they until the final, which has extra time for some reason. Until the final, they skip extra time. If the game after 90 minutes it's even, and knockout stage games, so that in this case we're at the quarters and then the semis, straight to penalties.
Mm-hmm.
The final is the only game that does extra time, during which Argentina actually won, by the way. They beat Colombia in extra time. But yeah, so we got a penalty shootout right in front of us. Trying to think, I haven't been to like an extensive number of games. I've been to a lot. Obviously I attended a lot of MLS games, which are almost exclusively regular season. So,
Right.
I've seen a lot of regular season games, of course, have no penalty shootouts. So this is the first time I recall seeing penalties live.
Well, yeah, I saw the penalties demonstration, like the exhibition that they did at the Arsenal match last summer. So,
that's right.
But again, it's very different when it actually matters,
Mm-hmm.
Like that was there was no beer shower at the Arsenal United match when someone made or blocked the shot.
Yeah. I suspect there were a good chunk of fans who didn't even realize it was going to happen. They're like, "Oh, hey, penalties, cool."
They announced it in the stadium. They said that, I forget at what point, it was maybe before the game or during halftime or something. They announced that was going to happen after. Yeah. But yeah, so this penalty shootout was the sloppiest one I remember seeing in the matches where I've seen them happen so far, which is basically Europa League and Champions League are the shootouts that I've seen so far. And this was not that. This was like I don't remember seeing so many missed or blocked like in the first five. Like that was. And evenly, which was funny because then it went to the 6-1, which was where Canada ended up winning. But just seeing and like it was block for block or miss for miss, like they were the points were dropped in the same way, which was kind of funny the way that it happened.
Yeah, and some of that, I think a lot of it just stems from nerves. You think this is the moment, like this is it. We're standing here. We have a chance to, especially from Venezuela's case. Not to dismiss Canada totally in this case. Obviously, they feel the pressure, but Canada doesn't go to the Copa America all the time. Canada doesn't have almost 100-year history of doing nothing in the Copa America. Venezuela looked at this draw, saw themselves getting Canada in the quarterfinals, and had to be thinking, we're going to do it. We're going to the semifinals, which is a round that made like twice before. For them to be able to do that is a massive moment in Venezuelan soccer history. For Canada, that it would have been great it was obviously great for them, but would not have carried the same resonance in terms of the history of their confederation. So you wonder a little bit, especially for a team like Venezuela, how much that weighs on them while they're doing it. But also, a lot of penalties were kind of poor. I think we saw a miss and a post, as well as some saves. So it was. The nerves there. They only played the Copa America. Well, they played the Copa America in any number of stretch of years. Honestly, it's never been that regularly scheduled. But those tournaments, like in the World Cup, this might be it. This might be for some of those Venezuelans, this is their one shot at the Copa America. They will never play in this tournament again because it'll be for another 4 years. And
right,
they may never be in a situation this good again. So that kind of pressure is hard to. You can't simulate that. You can't recreate that. You can't practice that. You do your best to be ready for the moment, and then when you're in it, you just hope you prepared enough. And
that's true. All right. So one question that I had about this, now that Argentina has gone on and won the whole thing. So you see, I'm wearing the Argentina Messi shirt that I bought at the group stage match when I saw him play. So, you've got the Argentina crest, you've got the Adidas logo, you've got a World Cup crest for being World Cup champions. Do they adorn this anymore with some kind of Copa America champions insignia, or it's going to start to look like a NASCAR or something? Like,
I don't think so. So even the World Cup badge is kind of new.
Okay.
I don't mean obviously for Argentina it is, but just in general, as having been worn, I feel like this is maybe even like the second time. Maybe I think the French may have done it after. It's definitely a new thing that they're doing a little bit more of. Typically, what I feel like I've seen is you wear the badge. It's sort of the competition you've won. So, like, I guess Argentina would have worn the Copa America one this year since they're in the Copa America and they won it last time. But obviously it's not. That says FIFA World Cup. I know.
Just double checking. Yeah, that's what I thought it said.
I don't know. Maybe the World Cup supersedes them. So if you've won the World Cup, who cares what else you've won? I don't know. It is an interesting thing. I don't really know how they work through that or what. counts as whatnot. I mean, the big one, famously, of course, is the stars above the crest are representative of the number of World Cups you've won.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that. Okay.
Right. So Argentina, as you see, they've now got 3. They, for the longest time, had 2, of course. The only exception to that I'm aware of is Uruguay, which has 4 stars above their crest. Now, they won the World Cup twice, but they also have, from that early 20th century period, 2 Olympic gold medals, back when that actually was a prestigious tournament. And so Uruguay is sort of, quote unquote, allowed to keep the stars, which are the kind of thing that exists in most places of the world, but not in England. You see a lot of clubs as well, especially on the continent and other places. MLS does it. They put the stars above the crest, symbolic of how many titles they've won. England doesn't do that at all. England does have a star above the 3 Lions crest on the internationals, but a lot of times it's like silver or even white. Like it.
Oh, so you don't even see it?
It kind of blends into the shirt because they don't do the stars thing.
Interesting.
Which there's a joke in there about having only won 1 major trophy ever in their history. But again, you look at the clubs. The English clubs don't do that. Arsenal would have a handful of them if they did, but they don't do that way. It seems a much more continental thing.
Huh. Interesting. So, any final thoughts on Copa America before we move on to dessert?
From the tournament perspective, it was a really interesting tournament. Definitely has a bit more of a car crash quality, both in the way the games were played, very physical, also some off-the-field stuff. And we didn't even think about the Canadian droning until afterwards, apparently, because allegedly some of that happened in the Copa. At least there were rumors of that. I don't want to go too far in that accusation. Yeah. But you also have, I mean, in the semifinal, the Uruguayan players went into the stands with the feeling they needed to protect their family members who were surrounded by Colombian fans, which was definitely a breakdown in security. There were Colombian and Argentine fans who were breaking into the stadium in Miami for the final. So the game ended up being delayed about an hour or so.
Oh, no.
Yeah, the final was a mess. So a lot of the organization of the tournament does not look particularly good. How much of that mostly reflects on CONMEBOL, the South American Federation who organized it? Probably them. But, the U.S., of course, some of these sites will be hosting the World Cup in 2 years. So there's some things that'll have to be worked on. On the other hand, this sort of thing that doesn't really happen at FIFA run events like the World Cup. Like FIFA doesn't let these sorts of things happen. So I suspect this will be a slightly better run tournament. But the soccer was interesting. Definitely, I would say, if you're looking for aesthetic pleasure, I think the Euros were definitely what I saw was definitely the cleaner tournament in that regard as far as the quality of the games. Mm-hmm. But I think sometimes they're a little more of the blood and guts that comes from the figuratively blood and guts, not necessarily literal. That you get from the Copa it's a different flavor. I don't want to sit here and say what's better so much. I think it's a different flavor of the game. Even if there are probably some well-deserved criticisms of some of the things that happen in the Copa. But in terms of the Copa, all an interesting tournament. Not so great from the U.S. perspective. It got the manager fired. So
right. Because the U.S. didn't even make it out of the group stage, right?
They are the first ever host country to get grouped, to not make it out of the group stage.
Oh. That's not good.
Not great, Bob. But yeah, so Greg Berhalter has been relieved of his duties as the national team manager. We'll see who the next one is, but they say they'll have somebody in place for September. One of the front runners is, since this is an Arsenal show, one of the front runners is Arsenal legend Patrick Vieira, who is currently, most recently, of Strasbourg in France. He has since left the club. It did so shortly after the Copa America, which set everyone's attention off. We'll see how that plays out going forward. But I do also say, as far as the individual game we attended, I had not really been planning to attend a Copa America game because the games in Houston weren't really they were at difficult times for me in terms of getting to the stadium and whatnot, or having time for that. So I am very appreciative of the opportunity that you provided. And so I wanted to make sure I thanked you for that. That was a wonderful experience. And of course, it's nice to see, briefly as we did, your son and your parents.
Yeah,
your parents I've known a long time. Your son, not that long, but there's
nobody's known him that long.
No, yeah, exactly. That's a quirk in the chronological scale. But anyway, and so I did want to make sure I thanked you for the opportunity. Even if it we got a fascinating game, but also it was the only thing we were missing was a live broadcast, but you can't have everything, I guess.
Yeah. No, you're welcome. The pleasure was all mine. Like I said, I probably won't ever get more out of a sporting event than one that I go to with you. So
wait till you talk about a sport I actually know things about. No, I'm kidding.
So for dessert, what I wanted to talk about was after the match was over and after we made our way out of the parking lot traffic and all that, which, by the way, was so much better at AT&T Stadium compared to MetLife. It's not even close.
It was very smooth. I was very impressed with how smoothly that all went.
Not bad at all.
Especially given how close to the stadium we parked.
Yeah, exactly. Although I will say what was really interesting when I was leaving MetLife was I actually in the parking lot saw somebody who I know from my town in the parking lot 2 hours away at MetLife. Yeah. So that was pretty funny. Of course, part of how I know him is like through soccer in my town. So it's not totally crazy, but that was kind of funny. But so after we made our way back, I wanted to try and get you to try out the Apple Vision Pro and watch some of the sport related content that they have on there, which is really two things at this point. There's the kind of experience immersive, they call it. It's like the sizzle reel that just shows like little clips of all the different immersive video that they have. And then there's the MLS Cup highlights reel from last year's MLS Cup tournament. So you watched it without your glasses, which was probably not great. If you need them as much as I do, that would make it not awesome. That's just the nature of the thing. You don't wear your glasses inside. You need specially made prescription inserts. So, that makes it tough. Mm-hmm. But what did you think with those caveats?
It is a fascinating thing. There's a part of me that was mildly disappointed that it was the MLS Cup from 2023 and not 2021, where New York City won, which would have been more fun. But that's okay. It was an interesting one to watch. There is something. Yeah, I mean, immersive is the right word. You do where the cameras are. It is impressive where the cameras are placed because you're obviously not quite on the field of play. But you are close enough that, even closer than you would normally get, like sitting in the stands. And so the closeness was there. And there is something interesting about the way it handles the depth, the kind of depth that you get in the video. Like you can almost really feel the depth between the different players, the position of the ball as it comes in. Some of that, I wonder if it's just the positioning of the camera and where that comes in.
Well, but it is stereoscopic vision, too.
Yes, the quality of the technology as well is a big part of that. And it really... It was something. I don't know that I would go so far as to watch a whole game that way. But of course they were, because it was highlights, you were checking things out from different perspectives, and so they're switching cameras.
And that's a big question, right? At some point, inevitably, there are going to be entire games available this way. At first, it may be after the fact, and hopefully at some point it'll be live. And the question is, how do you handle perspective, right? Yeah. Like games aren't telecast from a single fixed camera the way that this basically is. You need a way to move between cameras. You're not probably going to move the camera around. You're going to want a fixed perspective, otherwise it can cause like nausea and stuff, especially if it's moving fast. So it might be that you have controls on the screen for you to pick, like look at like a top-down view of the stadium and just look around and figure out, okay, I'm going to move over here now or over here or something. Who knows? Maybe use a game controller to move between different spots or something. Yeah. But
I've long sort of said that what I'd actually like for a broadcast is essentially like a seat view, like basically put it. And I generally speaking, I like to sit upper deck in stadiums or high up because I like to sort of see the game playing out in front of me and a little more of a tactical perspective. So I'd be perfectly happy with a camera perched, up in the top row and sort of looking in a fixed one because I've complained about the movement of the camera and how it throws things off.
Yeah.
This would be interesting. I don't, it would be an interesting way to sort of experience the game in terms of the television. Yeah, it'll be kind of curious how they do that. I don't know how much I'd want to necessarily move around. I mean, one of the things you lose, of course, in the stadium, as you saw, is you lose like the ability to have replays in the way they do in a broadcast.
Right. Which obviously, like, it is being broadcast at that point. They could have an overlay that shows you close up when something happens.
Yeah.
They could have a virtual jumbotron, right? Like, it's a virtual like environment. They could have something like that they show you. I mean, what it might also end up being like is if you go into the TV app where you can watch movies, and this is Apple's own video viewing experience, but for 2D videos or like 3D cinematic videos. So not immersive, but 3D like you would see in a theater, which I know you don't like, but that's in the theater where there's a lot of compromises. And if you ever got the chance to do a demo of the Apple Vision Pro and see a 3D movie there, it's different because like each eye is getting a different video feed. They don't have the glasses that manipulate it. It may have been like what you didn't react well to. But so in that app where you watch movies, when you go into the immersive experience there, it's like you're in a theater, and it lets you pick where you are along 3 axes. You can be front row, or actually 2 axes, front row, middle row, or back row. And then you get to pick, are you at floor level or are you in, I forget if they call it balcony or mezzanine, but you get to raise yourself up. And like, I love being in the front of the balcony is my preferred perspective for watching a movie. I could see something like that where they have cameras positioned at different parts of a stadium and you pick your preference. Like, oh, you like watching it from, a more high perspective, or maybe you like being behind the goal or something like that. Maybe different people have different preferences instead of it being something that you're trying to live edit in real time as it's going on or something. But
yeah, it could be. I mean, I'm very curious to see how they go forward with that and what they want to do. Obviously, with and Apple has a long-term deal with MLS, so they'll have. I'm sure they'll get a chance to experiment on some things as well.
MLS and Leagues Cup, which is going on right now. So,
Leagues Cup is more or less their. I don't want to say it's their invention. MLS played a significant role in that, but certainly, it did not exist before last season.
Oh, I don't. You may have told me that at the time, but I don't remember.
There was a tournament called the Leagues Cup, which was sort of from the MLS perspective, it was for the teams that didn't make the CONCACAF Cup or Champions League or whatever it's called, and sort of the next tier of the standings. He's got some of the top Mexican teams, but it was like a small knockout thing. Like people, I imagine a lot of folks didn't even know what was going on. This one is this kind of massive stop the season for a month and do this whole tournament thing. That started last year was the first one. I did watch some of the games. I watched Houston lose on a late goal to Atlas, which was kind of disappointing, and then New York City beat Querétaro last night on penalties. So interesting start to the tournament from my perspective, but
So what's coming up next week?
Arsenal continues their U.S. tour. They played 2 games already against in L.A., Bournemouth and Manchester United. They're going to play Liverpool in Philadelphia, which is, I believe, I just looked it up, on the 31st. So another preseason game. Then they will come back to London. They'll have the Emirates Cup, as I understand it. Which is just a preseason tournament played at the Emirates. It's called a tournament. It's just a couple of preseason games played at the Emirates. And then they'll get set for the season opener, which is, I believe, a little less than 3 weeks from today. Recording on Monday. Home against Wolves to open up the new campaign. And I know we are. I believe, as we discussed, we're taking next week off, but the following week we'll have a season preview, in part because we need to talk about transfers, which didn't happen a great deal, obviously related to especially the European Championships, but the Continental Championships slowed the Euros and the Copa America slowed things down. But as we record today on Monday, things have happened officially in the last 24 to 48 hours, and presumably there were a handful more to come before we get to the start of the season, and definitely by the time we close the transfer window closes at the end of August.
Yeah.
So it's almost Happy New Year.
I think you and I may be using different calendars or something. All right. Well, thanks for joining us at Gooner U. If you're watching on YouTube, you can also listen to our show on Apple, Spotify, and some other places. If you're only listening, try watching us on YouTube with the link in the show notes. Your homework for today is to comment on a video, either this one or watch one of our shorts, and tell us what you think of it. Thanks again to our sponsor, Zencastr. Check out our description for links to everything we talk about, including our sponsor, as well as our Instagram, Twitter, and Threads pages. Again, my name is Dov, and you can find me on Twitter at Dov Frankel. With me, as always, is Keith, and you can find him very shortly in a pub watching Arsenal matches.
And for the next 2 weeks, go USA!